Well, welcome back. Today, I'd like to talk about an observation I made at a gathering over the last few days, a social gathering. We were sat and obviously socializing and interacting at an event hosted by a friend, and I overheard a conversation between two people, a lady and a man, and he asked her, "Are you married?" And her reply was that no. If I were married, you would have heard about it by now. And they kept speaking, they kept conversing, and I obviously eavesdropped, and it was obvious that she was trying to, I guess, rationalize why she wasn't married. You could tell from the words that she uttered that it was something she wished that she could do differently. And so I thought perhaps that I should speak very, very briefly to the topic. Her clock is ticking. Now, over the last 40 years, if you want to be more precise, you might go back as far as, say, 50 years. But over the last 40 years, particularly, there's been a slight change in what we call intersectional dynamics and relationships. From a societal perspective in the modern West, we've done a huge disservice to women. Now, this comes from a man, and I know when men say this, it's not an easy thing to listen to or to hear, but hear me nonetheless. We've done a huge disservice to ladies. We've tried to explain out things that are biologically known. We've tried to explain out such issues as social constructs. We've tried to encourage women to believe that there are no limitations biologically, and that whatever desire a woman wishes to have, providing she strives to achieve that goal, nature and biology cannot stop her. And it's been a very empowering message. One I certainly would hope that most women would be exposed to, obviously with the important qualifications that with choices come consequences, constraints, and trade-offs. That you can't have everything, because we as men, from a very, very young age, we are led to understand that there are limitations in being a man. We are made aware of the importance of understanding what those limitations could be. We're made to understand that sometimes we're not as good enough, or we're not good enough for specific goals. And it's not a shame to feel as though not achieving that goal perhaps makes you less of a man. We accept the whole concept of hierarchies and the fact that some people do better in certain areas of life. If you're shorter, then you're less likely to play basketball. If you have an IQ higher than someone who has a less of an IQ, you're more likely to go to an Ivy League school. With all of that, we still encourage all men to strive for their goals and dreams, but to be aware that there are certain natural laws, there are certain limitations, biology, nature, sometimes genetic lottery in terms of where you were born, that limit you. And that is not something to be ashamed of. It's something to recognize, embrace, and try to walk your way around it in the most intelligent way. Women, on the other hand, over the last 40 years have been told that they're equal to men, and many have embraced this doctrine so religiously and believe that from a nature and from a biological perspective that the time clock for men and women are the same. I'd like to say to the ladies that it's not the case. And as painful as this might be for me to share, and as difficult as it might be for you to listen to, if you're younger, it's important to embrace this message. The clock is ticking. The clock is ticking for every one of us. As a matter of fact, one of the things I wish that young people could be told, from the moment when you're able to understand the concept, as young as you might be, is that each day you are dying. You are dying every day. For every day that passes, you're closer to the end of your life than you were at the start of the day. So that you should take advantage of the time you have and to maximize that life and do the best you can and strive for the best. Take your losses with your gains, but do not delude yourself in believing that you have an infinite amount of time ahead. Women, biologically speaking, have a different time clock than men. And it's partly the reason why men mature very slowly. A man who is 25 still behaves like he's 19. He would very happily be in mama's basement or pop's basement, having his laundry done by mum, having the food paid for by dad, and he would happily be there until 35. He wakes up at 35 and then he decides to leave his father's basement. At 35, biologically speaking, and if you've listened to what I've shared in some of my videos, 35 is that time when a man can start entertaining a family, a committed relationship, an exclusive relationship, and anything that requires the reproduction or the nurturing of a family. At 35, on the other hand, is not quite the same for a woman, because a man can reproduce from 35 onwards and can continue reproducing until he's 70 and even more. You might call it a double standard by nature, and so be it. The key thing is to understand what the time clock represents and how to cash in your chips when you've already won. If you go to Vegas, one of the things I observed the first time I went to Vegas was the hotels, and the trading and the dealing floors did not have windows. There were no natural lights. So you could be there on the tables playing for 24 hours, if providing you didn't feel sleepy. The point being that there was no way for you to reconcile from your body clock the fact that the environment had changed, because it was all artificial lights, and it felt as though it was the same time. Women, you have a different body clock. Now, let me go back to the observation I made. The lady in question must have been in her 40s. As I looked at her, I tried to imagine what she would have looked like 20 years earlier, even 10 years earlier. And it was very obvious that she had attractive features. And she would have had attractive features at a younger age. And in her present state, when you adjust for her age, there weren't that many suitors, there weren't that many men who were coming to the table to negotiate and to ask for her hand in marriage. A sad and desperate reality. The reason is as follows, painful as it might be. I talk about a woman's value using 4 different parameters, 3 of which I say are important, 1 of which I say, for most men, competent, educated, hard-working men, is irrelevant. The first is your sexual marketplace value, SMV. The second, your reproductive fertility value, your RFV. The third, your non-sexual marketplace value, NSMV. And number 4 is your economic intrinsic value, your EIV. We'll begin with the fourth. This deals with your wealth, education level, earning potential, human capital, your ability to produce your investments, the fact that you have a great career. Most men genuinely believe that they should be the ones who provide and protect. So we don't place too much emphasis on what you earn and how educated you are and how much wealth you've created, either yourself or from your family. We really don't care. So we take that out of the picture completely, which then leaves 3 specific ways through which men judge women in terms of ranking women for the purpose of selecting the spouse. Your sexual marketplace value, which simply fundamentally deals with attractiveness and youth. The younger you are, usually all things remaining equal, the more attractive you are. So we're looking at your height, your weight, height to waist ratio, height to weight ratio. We're looking at your face, symmetry, proportionality, placements. We're looking at what we feel at the first instance that we see you, first impressions. And once we do that, we put you in 2 categories, F and W. Wife material, if we want to get married, or long-term partnership material, or simply fun material. The second being your RFV, your reproductive fertility value. And this is where the body clock comes in particularly, because a woman who is genetically blessed in her 40s can be extremely attractive. I have seen women who are in their 40s more attractive than most of the young girls in their 20s, simply because she looks after her body. From a height to weight relationship, she's ideal, she's attractive, she dresses feminine, she speaks and walks and carries herself with grace. There's an aura of beauty and softness about her. And I've seen women who are 20 and 21 who are rather overweight, do not look after themselves, are not feminine, wearing a very aggressive, masculine demeanor, and therefore very unattractive. The point being that you can be older but very attractive. But all things remaining equal, the older version of you should not be able to compete at the same level with the younger version of you, especially for women. Same applies for men. But your reproductive fertility value comes in handy, especially for men who want to be married. Because for some men, one of the reasons we want to be married is because we want to have a family. We pay the price of submission and the price of the union, submitting to the union, because we believe it's the right structure for a family. We don't have to, because we can always obtain a family without the commitment and the legal structure of a marriage. But most men would agree to that on the basis that they get a family. So your reproductive fertility value really has to do with the quality of eggs you have, the quantity of eggs you have, and intrinsically one metric we use is your age. Not always, because you can have people who are much older, who are more fertile than women who are younger. But generally speaking, the younger you are, the higher your reproductive fertility value, the higher you should be able to reproduce. The more quality of eggs you have and the more quantity of eggs you have, the younger you are. So as you move from 18 and you move towards 36, which is where high risk pregnancy begins, your reproductive fertility value declines, with 23 to 27 being ideally the optimum period when a woman is the most fertile. Now, I'm not saying this is the right time to be a mother. I believe it's the wrong time to be a mother because you're not emotionally mature, you're not mentally as stable as you will be when you get to 30, or when you've achieved your goals, when you've done something with your life. But usually from 27 and above, 27 up to 32, those are the ideal period, the ideal phase for motherhood, for reproducing, because you still have good quality eggs, good quantity of eggs, but you're mature, you're financially more stable, you're emotionally more stable, you've actually sown your wild oats, so you know what not to do. You have some experience, and therefore you're not reliant on someone else outside of you for support. You feel as though you're a self-sufficient individual. From 36 and above, that is geriatric pregnancy. It starts to get complicated. When you get to 39 and above, it gets even more complicated. Now, your non-sexual marketplace value has to do with all of those attributes that you should have: attitude, mannerisms, etiquettes, your decorum, how you speak, how you dress, table manners, all of the things that the traditional virtues that came with motherhood, but that came with being a well-groomed young woman. Understanding the gender roles, knowing how to look after yourself, look after a man, look after a family. Unfortunately, your non-sexual marketplace value, like the other two, declines with age, all things remaining equal. And here's the reason, and this applies for people who are not married yet. The reason being, generally speaking, you obtain most of your non-sexual marketplace virtues before 18. 18 to 23 is college. Most people are not trying to be wives and mistresses. They're trying to be educated during that age phase. And so you're in college, university, and it's all about learning. So you're not practicing most of what you've been taught at home. When you graduate 23 to 27, you're straight into the work environment. For most people who live in cities, the last thing you do is cook. Most of the time you spend eating outside of work, or eating outside of the home and at work. So you're not really practicing, because if you've listened to what I've shared before, that phase should be about you. 5% of your time for relationships, 95% for yourself, your dreams, your goals, your aspirations. So you've gone through a phase between 18 and 27, which is 10 years, of not really practicing on any of such virtues that you may have learned from home. Now, from 27 and above, women forget the fact that the biological clock is ticking, and that phase moves quickly till 32. From 32 onwards, there's almost a reluctance, because you've achieved so much wealth, you've created something for yourself, and most women, effectively, you become the man that you want. You're independent, you're self-sustaining, and will be any man who expects you to go into the kitchen, make him a meal, do his laundry, speak to him in a feminine way, be able to be his inspiration. No, you effectively want a wife as a woman, because you've achieved everything a man could have achieved, which means your non-sexual marketplace value at 35 should be less than it was at 18, except you were home raised, and except you've stayed true to those values and to those virtues. The point of this being, at 39 or 40, if your sexual marketplace value is the lowest, which it is, and your reproductive facility value is the lowest, which it is, and your non-sexual marketplace value is the lowest, which it is, if you're unmarried. It simply means you're the least desirable in the marketplace to a man who is in the same economic bracket as you are, but also a man who is the same age as you are. Now, I know, for example, for a fact, in my case, when I turned 35, there was no way I could be caught or found dating someone who was the same age as I was. Just not possible. It was easy to date someone who was 25, 26, 27, 28. for a number of reasons, but primarily because they were a lot easier to date. They were a lot more fun to date. It was more peaceful to date. I didn't have to go into arguments and debates, because effectively the woman at 35 has become the man that she wanted. So it's not peaceably, it's a difficult experience. Now, are there exceptions to the rule? Yes. But in the majority, no. And so women who have got to 40 realize that they're set in their ways. You can't really change them. And any man who comes into your life at that stage, which comes to the second part of today's conversation, any man who comes into your life at this stage, if he's around the same age group as you are, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but he's not your first choice. He's what I would call your second. And this is an important thing, because earlier today, and I think I will put the link so you can see the link on the Telegraph, there was an article of a woman saying, I'm 39 and I don't find my husband or my partner attractive, but I want a baby and my time is ticking. And I said this to a few friends in different occasions, that once a woman goes beyond 30, I'll put it differently, it is my position that a woman who is above 30, particularly above 35, that you've just met, should not be considered for a serious relationship if you're within the same age group. Now, if you're a man who is 55 and you've had kids and you do not want kids, she might be ideal, and more power to you. But a man who's 35 should avoid dating a woman who's 35 or above completely, for a number of reasons. Assuming it takes about 9 months for you to date and recognize that you guys would like to be with each other, and you decide to do a trial marriage by moving in together for maybe a year, and let's say from the point you've met to when you get married is maybe a year and 6 months, or a year and say 3 months, that takes it from 35 to roughly 37, just under 37. My advice, generally speaking, is do not have kids for the first 3 years, to make sure both of you are compatible, to make sure both of you want to be together. 3 years, if you add that to 36 and a half years, is roughly 40 years, 39 and a half years. At that stage, she can't reproduce except by luck, or except that she's frozen her eggs. In addition to that, you're not marrying a young girl. So women who are 35 and above, if you've just met them, my advice is for men within the same age group, just find someone else who is younger, someone who's not desperate, someone who is not worried that her time clock has run out. Because most of the time, my experience has been, she chooses you to have that need met, especially between 30 and 35, the urge to reproduce and be a mother kicks in, especially for women who have always said they never wanted to be mothers. That kicks in. That desire to be a mother is always much stronger than whatever affection she's feigning for you. So most likely, when she gets the baby, when she gets the ring, when she's married, she will have buyer's remorse. She will come to the realization that, well, now I have achieved everything I wanted. But if I could turn back the hands of time, I never would have selected you, the man, because you were never my type. I just needed you to meet my goals, which means you become the loser, you become the sucker. So my advice has always been for men, if you can, date down, find women who are younger, 30 years and below, because that gives you the 3.5 years from when you meet. That includes marriage, but also that includes a 3-year period without kids, to make sure that both of you are compatible. Now, from 30, you have enough time till 34 to make that leap to reproduce. Whereas if you start at 35, that takes you towards 40, 39 to be precise, which is high risk. Now, let me I'll bring myself back to the conversation I began with as I summarize. As I sat there listening to the woman speak and observing her afterwards, I felt sad. I felt sad because here was an example of a woman keeping her chips on the table too long. Now, I know for a fact that in her 20s, late 20s, 27, 28, 29, 30, there were men who came and she said, "You're not good enough." In her early 30s, 31, 32, 33, 34, there were men who came and she said, "You're not good enough." In her mid-30s, 35, 36, even 37, there were men who came and she said, "You're not good enough. I'm waiting for my ideal man." And unfortunately, time runs out. The clock is always ticking, like an hourglass, sand glass. Sometimes the sand runs out before we realize that it's too late. So, as I conclude, here is a recommendation for women. I talk about the various stages of a woman's life, 18 and upwards. Now, pre-18, I have nothing to say because you should be under the authority and direction of your father or the male role model in your life. From 18, you're emancipated, you're an adult. So I provide, and I've done so, and I have no intentions of going into the detail in this few minutes, but I've covered that in so many sessions. I advise you to think about your life in stages. 18 to 22, you have 5 years. 23 to 27, you have 5 years, stage 2. 27 to 32, stage 3, 5 years. 33 to 35, you have 3 years. So in total, you have 18 years. Within this 18-year period, you must get the right decisions about your life, your future, your dreams, your goals settled. The first stage, 18 to 23, is education. That's for you. The second, 23 to 27, right, the first stage, 18 to 22, for education. 23 to 27 is where you start your professional career, to empower yourself, to build human capital so you're self-sustaining. From 27, or at the end of 27, you're ready for a relationship. Now, I explained in the prior videos that you shouldn't be in a committed relationship before 27. You need time for yourself, sow your wild oats, have fun, date multiple people, get an understanding of who you are, what you like, what you do not like. From 28 and above, this is where you actually have to make the right choices very quickly. Now you can start dating exclusively, with intention. You date for a year, you should never have a date, you should never date anyone for more than 6 months. But the idea should be that by 29 you've met someone and you're ready. You don't move in with a man until you're within a few inches from marriage. From 28, 29, you can entertain marriage. If you get married, do not have kids for the first 3 years. Enjoy each other, and that takes you to 32. So we've covered the first stage, second stage, and third stage. From 33 to 36, you have from 33 to 35, you have 3 full years. And let's say you want to have 3 kids. You step them. 33, 34, 35. You get it done. You've had your life. You've partied. You've enjoyed life. You've made money. You've been married. Both of you have enjoyed 3 years of bliss together. And then you've had kids. And this allows you the possibility and the opportunity to return back to work once the kids get to preschool age. So, if you had your last child at 36, by 39, you can be back at work, which means, technically speaking, you've only missed 3 years out of the work, assuming in this case, you were still working part-time. You've missed only 3 years. But if you stop working the moment you got pregnant, and let's say this is at age 34, then between 34 and 39, you've only missed out 5 years. You can come back to the workforce and regain your expertise, retrain yourself. The point of this being, the third stage of your life is very important. Is where most women mess things up. 27 to 32 sometimes goes with the wind. The clock is ticking. Most women cannot hear the sound. So most women wake up at 32, 33, which is effectively what we call extra time. Effectively, it's not just extra time, it's sudden death. You're at the last stage. You've got 3 more years before geriatric pregnancy. You've wasted 15 years. And finding someone in a rush is never a good idea, because most of the time there's an aura, there's a fragrance that comes with desperation that men can perceive. I've shared in many videos before that women don't understand that men who are in the dating marketplace and who are just there for sex see women who are 33 and above as simply fun girls, because we can smell the aura of desperation. And all we have to say is a few words to soften you up for you to give us sex. And most of the time, the men use women in that age group, 33 all the way up to 40, they use women as simply drive-by experiences. And the reason is simply because of that desperation fragrance that the woman has around her. So, ladies, as much as it may be difficult to hear from a man, you don't have to live like your life like this. Take the lessons from the women who have gone through the pain and the suffering and make some changes. Make some important changes, especially the younger you are. Understand that there are times when you pull some chips back from the table and say, I think I've won enough. It's time to exit stage left.